It was just another day for Lisa Thompson, or so it seemed. She looked like any other person in the crowded city streets. Her pace was steady, her expression calm, and her eyes watched the world with quiet observation. She blended in effortlessly, dressed in simple clothes, a plain jacket, worn jeans, comfortable shoes. There was nothing about her appearance that would catch anyone's eye. Most people walked past her without a second glance, completely unaware of who she truly was or what she had been through. But there was something about Lisa that went far deeper than anyone could see. Behind that calm, ordinary exterior lay a story so powerful it could change how people saw her, and maybe even how they saw themselves. Lisa Thompson was a person with hidden strength, a quiet force, and a depth that few could understand. As she walked, she noticed things. The way people moved quickly, heads down, focused on their own lives. She saw the young woman juggling bags of groceries, the elderly man waiting patiently to cross the street, the teenagers laughing as they huddled around their phones. Lisa saw all of this, but no one saw her, and she was used to that. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be overlooked. For most of her life, she had learned how to blend in, to stay out of sight. It was safer that way. People didn't question her. They didn't wonder who she was or what her story might be. To everyone around her, she was just another face in the crowd. But if anyone had looked closer, if anyone had taken a moment to really see her, they might have sensed there was more to Lisa than met the eye. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, a stillness that hinted at something deeper. She wasn't someone who needed to draw attention to herself, and she didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. Lisa had learned long ago that action spoke louder than words, and she was someone who believed in the power of action. As she continued down the street, she heard the distant sound of sirens. Most people wouldn't give it a second thought, but Lisa's senses sharpened. She felt her muscles tense, her mind already going through scenarios, possibilities. It was a habit she couldn't shake, an instinct she had developed over years of facing the unexpected. To anyone watching, she was just another woman pausing on the sidewalk, but inside, her mind was racing. Lisa knew things weren't always what they seemed. She knew that danger could hide in plain sight, that people could mask their intentions, that sometimes the world was far more complicated than it appeared. Lisa had learned these lessons through experience, through moments that had tested her patience, her strength, and her resilience. She had spent years observing, learning, and understanding the world around her. She knew how to read people, how to sense when something was off, and how to protect herself when necessary. She wasn't someone who panicked easily. She had a calmness that came from knowing she could handle whatever came her way. Most people wouldn't guess that Lisa had a history that would surprise them. They wouldn't know that beneath her unassuming appearance was a woman who had seen the best and the worst of humanity, a woman who had been shaped by challenges most people couldn't imagine. She had faced hardships, prejudice, and injustice, and through it all, she had come out stronger, wiser, and more determined. Lisa's life hadn't been easy. She had experienced moments of doubt, times when she had questioned herself and her path. But each time, she had found a way to keep going, to move forward with purpose. She believed in standing up for what was right, even when it was hard, even when it meant facing criticism or rejection. She was a person who valued integrity, respect, and justice, and she lived by those principles every day. As she walked past a group of people, she could feel their eyes on her. They looked at her, then quickly looked away, uninterested, indifferent. Lisa was used to it. She didn't mind that people didn't notice her. She didn't need recognition or praise. What mattered to her was that she knew who she was and what she stood for. She knew that her life had a purpose, even if others couldn't see it. In a way, her life had been a series of tests, moments that had challenged her to stay true to herself, to hold on to her values. She had been underestimated, overlooked, even dismissed, but she had never let that define her. She knew her worth, and she knew that her actions spoke louder than any words. Lisa was a person of quiet strength, And she knew that true power didn't always need to be seen to be real. Behind her calm exterior, Lisa carried memories that were both painful and empowering. She had seen sides of people that few others had. She knew what it was like to be judged, to be looked at through the lens of someone else's prejudice. But she also knew the strength that came from rising above it, from standing firm in who she was, regardless of how others saw her. Lisa continued walking, her mind calm and focused. She was prepared for whatever the day might bring, ready to face any challenge with the same strength that had carried her through so many difficult moments before. She knew that her journey wasn't over, that there would always be new challenges, new battles to fight. But she was ready, as she always had been. To the world, Lisa Thompson was just another face in the crowd, an ordinary person with an ordinary life. But Lisa knew the truth. She knew that her life was anything but ordinary, that her story was one of resilience, courage, and purpose. And as she walked down that busy street, blending into the world around her, she carried her story with her, a quiet strength hidden beneath a calm exterior, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. It was a sunny afternoon when Lisa Thompson found herself in a situation that had become all too familiar. She was on her way home, walking through a busy part of town. She'd just left a small coffee shop, a quiet place where she often liked to spend a few minutes gathering her thoughts before heading home. Her routine was simple. It kept her grounded, allowing her to keep a sense of peace in a world that often judged her based on looks alone. As Lisa walked down the street, she noticed a police car slowly pulling up alongside her. She glanced over, meeting the gaze of a police officer who looked at her with an expression she knew well, cold, dismissive, and curious, but not in a friendly way. The officer, whose name tag read Johnson, looked her up and down with a slight sneer on his face. It was the kind of look she'd encountered too many times before. To him, she was just a face in the crowd, someone he assumed didn't belong in this neighborhood. Lisa kept walking, ignoring the car creeping alongside her, hoping it would pass by. But Officer Johnson had other plans. "Hey, you there," he called out, his voice sharp and commanding. Lisa felt the eyes of people around her shift in her direction, but she kept her head high, her steps steady. She wasn't about to let anyone intimidate her, not even this officer. She stopped, slowly turning to face him. She knew her rights, but she also knew how quickly situations like this could escalate. She'd seen it happen before. "Yes, officer," she replied calmly, her voice steady and respectful. She looked at him directly, not in a challenging way, but with a quiet strength that showed she wasn't afraid. Officer Johnson got out of his car, standing tall with a look of authority he didn't really need to exaggerate. His smirk grew as he looked her over, taking in her simple clothes and assuming she didn't have much to her name. He saw her as someone who could be easily dismissed, someone who wouldn't dare question his authority. "What are you doing around here?" he asked, his tone suspicious. Lisa took a breath. She could tell he didn't see a successful professional or a person with authority. No, all he saw was a woman he thought didn't belong. She had felt this many times before, that invisible line people drew between us and them, and the subtle but clear message that she was on the wrong side of it. "I'm just walking home, officer," Lisa replied, keeping her tone neutral. "Oh yeah," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Where's home for you?" His words had a hint of disbelief, as if he couldn't imagine someone like her living nearby. Lisa felt the sting of his words, but she didn't let it show. She simply replied with her address, knowing it was only a few blocks away. She didn't owe him an explanation, but she knew that sometimes it was better to go along with things, at least for now. She had learned to pick her battles. Johnson's eyes narrowed as she gave him her address, and he let out a low chuckle. "Really? You're saying you live around here?" He spoke loudly, making sure the people around could hear. A few onlookers had slowed down, watching the interaction with curious eyes. Lisa could feel the weight of their stares, but she kept her head up. "Yes, officer. I've lived here for a while now," she said, her voice firm. Johnson took a step closer, invading her personal space, and looked her up and down again. "You got any ID on you?" he asked, his tone flat, almost daring her to say no. Lisa reached calmly into her bag and handed him her ID, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. She knew that any sudden move could be misinterpreted. She'd read too many stories, heard too many warnings. She handed him the ID, watching his face as he studied it. She could see the flash of surprise in his eyes when he saw her name and address, but he quickly hid it, masking his reaction with another dismissive smirk. He said, handing her ID back to her with a slight shake of his head, as if he still didn't quite believe it. "So, what kind of work do you do, Miss Thompson?" he asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "I work in law enforcement," Lisa replied, keeping her tone neutral but steady. The moment the words left her mouth, she saw his expression falter for a split second. He hadn't expected that answer. She could see him reassessing her, but only for a moment. Then his smirk returned, more forced this time, but still there. It was clear that, in his mind, someone like her couldn't possibly be in law enforcement. He looked at her as if she just told him a bad joke. "Oh, really? Law enforcement, huh?" He let out a short, mocking laugh. "And what exactly do you do in law enforcement?" Lisa met his gaze, her calm demeanor unwavering. She was tempted to tell him exactly who she was, but she held back. There was a time and a place for everything, and she knew this wasn't the time to lay all her cards on the table. She decided to keep it simple. "I handle internal affairs," she said plainly, knowing that was all he needed to know for now. Officer Johnson's smirk faded slightly, but he still looked unconvinced. He crossed his arms, looking her up and down again, as if trying to spot any sign that she might be lying. "Internal affairs, huh? You sure about that?" he asked, his voice dripping with doubt. "Yes, officer. I'm sure," she replied, her tone steady and confident. There was a long pause as he stared at her, clearly trying to decide if he should believe her. He glanced around, noticing the small crowd that had gathered, watching the exchange. Perhaps feeling the pressure, he finally backed off, taking a small step away. "Well, Miss Thompson," he said, his tone slightly less aggressive but still condescending, "I'll let you go this time. But remember, you might want to be more careful about where you walk around here." Lisa nodded, understanding the veiled threat behind his words. She could tell that he still didn't believe her, or perhaps he simply didn't care. To him, she was just another person he could intimidate, another face he could dismiss. But she knew better. She knew who she was, and she knew that his opinion didn't define her. "Thank you, officer," she said calmly, pocketing her ID and turning to walk away. As she walked, she could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, but she didn't let it bother her. She held her head high, each step filled with quiet strength. She knew she had handled the situation the best way she could, staying calm and composed despite the officer's disrespect. It wasn't the first time she'd been treated this way, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. But she also knew that she had something they didn't, an inner strength, a quiet resilience that carried her through every situation, no matter how challenging. Lisa kept walking, her mind replaying the encounter. She thought about all the times she'd been judged, all the moments when people had looked at her and seen only what they wanted to see. She knew that many people saw only her appearance, never bothering to look deeper, to see the person she truly was. But she didn't need their approval or their validation. She knew her own worth, and that was enough. The encounter with Officer Johnson was just another reminder of the challenges she faced, the barriers that still existed, even in a city that claimed to be diverse and accepting. She knew that people like him would always be there, ready to judge, ready to dismiss. But she also knew that she had the power to rise above it. She had come too far to let anyone make her feel small. As she walked away, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She knew that one day, people like Officer Johnson would realize that their assumptions were wrong. One day, they would see that there was more to her than they could ever imagine. But until then, She would continue to move through the world with quiet strength, letting her actions speak for themselves. Lisa Thompson was not someone who needed to prove herself to anyone. She was someone who knew exactly who she was, and no one's opinion could change that. She was a force, even if the world wasn't ready to see it yet, and as she continued her journey home, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that her story was far from over. As Officer Johnson continued his rough, dismissive questioning, Lisa stood still, her expression calm. She looked at him with a steady gaze, never flinching, never giving him the satisfaction of seeing her react. Her silence was a choice, a powerful choice. She was used to moments like these, moments where people tried to strip away her dignity with their words, with their looks, with their assumptions. But Lisa had learned that sometimes silence spoke louder than words. It was a lesson she had mastered over years of dealing with people who underestimated her, people who thought they knew her story just by looking at her. Lisa watched as Officer Johnson smirked, feeling powerful, feeling as if he had control over the situation. He asked her questions in a tone that was both accusing and dismissive, a tone that suggested he had already made up his mind about her. To him, she was just another face, another person he could exercise his authority over without consequence. But he didn't know her, not really. He didn't know the strength she carried inside her, the patience she had honed through countless situations just like this. She was more than what he saw on the surface, and every second she remained silent. He was edging closer to a truth he couldn't possibly see coming. "Why are you so quiet, huh?" He sneered, leaning in, as if trying to intimidate her. He raised his voice, trying to make her feel small, but Lisa's gaze remained steady. She could feel his frustration growing, could sense the irritation in his voice as he demanded answers, expecting her to explain herself, to justify her presence. But Lisa had nothing to prove to him. She knew her rights, knew that his authority had limits. She also knew that reacting in anger, letting herself be rattled, would only give him what he wanted. Instead, she let the tension simmer, choosing to stay calm, to breathe, to let him feel the weight of her silence. She held her ground, not in defiance but in quiet resilience, showing him that she would not be shaken. Each question he asked, each insult he threw her way, seemed to bounce off her, leaving her unaffected. Inside, Lisa felt a mixture of calm and resolve. She had been through enough to know that situations like these could change in an instant. She knew that her strength lay in patience, in waiting for the right moment. She knew how to pick her battles, how to stay grounded even when others tried to unsettle her. "Why don't you answer?" Officer Johnson snapped, clearly annoyed by her composure. "People like you think you can just walk around, doing whatever you want. You think you're untouchable, don't you?" Lisa didn't reply. She just looked at him, her eyes steady, unyielding. His words were sharp, filled with judgment, but she didn't let them pierce her. She had heard this tone before, had faced these accusations before, and each time she had learned to stand a little taller, to hold her head a little higher. She understood that his words said more about him than they did about her. His assumptions, his anger, it was all rooted in his inability to see beyond his own biases. As he continued his interrogation, Lisa remained calm, biding her time. She could sense the frustration building in him, see the impatience in his eyes. He wanted her to break, to lose her composure, to give him a reason to say, "See, I was right about you." But Lisa wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. She took a deep breath, letting the moment stretch out, allowing the tension to build even further. There was a power in her silence, a strength that she didn't need to announce or explain. She knew that her presence alone, her refusal to be intimidated, was a statement. She was showing him that she could endure his treatment, that she could withstand his attempts to diminish her. And as each second passed, as she held her ground, she could feel him growing more and more unsettled. He hadn't expected her to stay calm, hadn't expected her to be so unshakable. "Are you going to answer me or not?" he demanded, his voice louder now, almost desperate for a reaction. But Lisa just looked at him, her expression calm, her gaze unwavering. She could see the cracks in his confidence, the frustration in his eyes as he realized that he wasn't getting the reaction he wanted. She watched him closely, observing every movement, every shift in his posture. She was taking it all in, noting every word he said, every insult he threw her way. She knew that each of these moments was leading up to something bigger, something he couldn't see but that she could feel building inside her. He stepped closer, trying to use his height, his presence, to make her feel small. But Lisa stood firm, not moving, not flinching. She was like a stone in a raging river, solid and unmovable, letting the waves crash around her, but never letting them sweep her away. She knew that her strength lay in her ability to remain calm, to stay grounded, to let the storm rage around her without letting it shake her. "Do you think you're above the law?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Do you think you're special?" Lisa didn't answer. She didn't need to. She knew who she was, knew what she stood for. She didn't need to prove her worth to him. She had learned long ago that her value wasn't determined by anyone's opinion of her. She was strong because she knew herself, because she had built her life on a foundation of resilience and integrity. She had faced people like him before, people who tried to break her spirit, to make her question herself. And each time, she had come out stronger. As he continued his questioning, Lisa held her ground, her silence a quiet form of resistance. She knew that words could be twisted, that anger could be used against her. So she chose silence, chose to let him see that she was unbreakable. She could see the frustration in his eyes, see the way he shifted uncomfortably as he realized that his words weren't reaching her, that his attempts to intimidate her were failing. In that moment, Lisa knew that she was stronger than him. She knew that her calm, her patience, was a strength he couldn't understand. He was used to people reacting, to people breaking under his authority. But Lisa was different. She had faced too much, had overcome too many challenges, to be shaken by one man's words. The tension between them grew, thickening the air, as Lisa continued to hold her silence. She could see that he was reaching the end of his patience, that he didn't know what to do with her calm, her unshakable presence. And in that moment, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She knew that she had won, not by fighting, not by arguing, but simply by being herself, by standing firm in her own strength. Little did he know that each insult, each attempt to belittle her, was only making her resolve stronger. She could feel the power of her silence, the strength in her patience, and she knew that, in the end, she would come out on top. She was Lisa Thompson, a woman who had faced adversity time and time again, and each time, she had come out stronger, wiser, more resilient. And as she looked at Officer Johnson, as she watched him struggle to maintain his composure, she knew that he had no idea who he was dealing with. He couldn't see the depth of her strength, the years of resilience that lay beneath her calm exterior, but she knew. And that knowledge gave her a quiet, unshakable power that no one could take away. In that moment, Lisa Thompson was not just a woman standing before an officer trying to break her spirit. She was a force, a quiet strength that could not be shaken, a silent power that was more profound than any words could express. And she knew that, no matter what he said, no matter how he tried to intimidate her, she would endure. She would rise above it, as she always had. The tension in the air was thick, almost visible. Officer Johnson continued to stare Lisa down, his confidence still intact, but with hints of doubt creeping in. He had been questioning her for what felt like an eternity, throwing accusations, making assumptions, and casting judgment. But Lisa stood firm, meeting his gaze with quiet strength, her composure never once faltering. She knew who she was, and she knew this moment was coming. She had waited patiently, endured the insults, the belittling, all while observing every move Officer Johnson made, every word he uttered. Finally, with a slight smirk, Officer Johnson took a step back, as if he believed he had achieved his goal, had put her in her place. The satisfaction on his face was unmistakable. He felt he had won, that he had asserted his authority over this woman he considered unworthy of respect. Little did he know, his perception was about to shatter. Lisa took a slow, deep breath, and then she reached into her jacket. Her movements were calm, deliberate. She pulled out a small black leather case and held it in her hand for a moment, her fingers curling around it. This was it. The moment she had prepared for. The moment she knew would turn the entire situation around. She raised her hand, allowing the leather case to open, and with one fluid motion, she revealed a badge. Her badge. The badge gleamed under the sunlight, catching Officer Johnson's eye instantly. His face, which had been smug and dismissive just a second ago, transformed. His eyes widened, his smirk vanished, replaced by shock and confusion. He took a small, instinctive step back, his gaze locked on the badge in her hand. "Captain Lisa Thompson," she said, her voice steady and calm, yet filled with an undeniable authority. "Internal affairs." Her words hung in the air, heavy and powerful. The expression on Officer Johnson's face was one of pure disbelief. He blinked, as if trying to process what he was seeing and hearing. This woman, the one he had treated with such disrespect, the one he had assumed was powerless, was not only a police officer but a captain in internal affairs. She was, in fact, someone with the authority to investigate officers like him, someone who held power over his career, his future. For a moment, Officer Johnson seemed frozen, his mind racing as he tried to understand the situation. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale and stunned. All the confidence, all the arrogance he had displayed, vanished in an instant. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. Lisa's calm gaze never wavered. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and resolve, her expression revealing that she had expected this moment, that she had known all along how this would end. She had given him every opportunity to treat her with respect, to see her as an equal, but he had chosen to judge her based on his own assumptions, his own prejudices, and now he was realizing the consequences of those choices. "Officer Johnson," she continued, her tone unwavering, "I've been watching you. I've been observing how you conduct yourself, how you treat people, how you misuse the authority given to you." The words were like a punch to the gut for Officer Johnson. His face flushed as he struggled to find something to say, anything that could excuse his behavior, but there was nothing. He knew it, and she knew it too. He had exposed himself, shown his true colors, and there was no taking it back. "I am responsible for ensuring that officers in this department uphold the law with integrity and respect," Lisa said, her tone firm but calm. "And from what I've seen, you have failed in that responsibility." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that seemed to crush him. Officer Johnson's eyes darted around, looking for a way out, but there was none. He had lost control of the situation, and he knew that any attempt to regain it would be futile. He was facing someone with more authority, more power than he had ever realized. The small crowd that had gathered was silent, watching the scene unfold with a mix of awe and disbelief. They had seen Officer Johnson treating Lisa with disrespect, had heard his accusations, his arrogant tone. And now, they were witnessing the truth, that this woman, who had stood there so calmly, so silently, was not only powerful, but had the authority to hold him accountable. Lisa took a step closer, her gaze never leaving his. She could see the fear in his eyes, the regret starting to form as he began to understand the gravity of his actions. This was a man who had believed he was untouchable, who had thought he could treat others however he pleased without consequence. But now he was facing someone who could change everything for him. "There are rules, Officer Johnson," she said quietly but firmly. "Rules that apply to everyone, including you. Your badge does not give you the right to abuse your power, to mistreat others, to act without accountability." Her words were steady, each one landing with precision. She could see him shrinking, his shoulders drooping as the reality of the situation settled over him. He had thought he was in control, had believed he was untouchable. But now, standing before Captain Lisa Thompson, he felt small, vulnerable, and exposed. Lisa took a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. She could feel the tension in the air, the silence from the crowd as they absorbed what was happening. She had always believed in justice, in fairness, in treating others with respect. And now she was showing everyone what that meant, showing them that even those who wore a badge were not above the law. "People like you make it hard for the public to trust us," she continued, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "You wear this uniform, but you don't honor what it stands for. Instead, you use it as a shield, a weapon to intimidate, to control. But that stops today." The finality in her words left no room for argument. Officer Johnson looked down, unable to meet her gaze. He had been stripped of his confidence, his arrogance, left standing there as a shadow of the man he had tried to project. He knew that his actions had consequences, that he would have to face the judgment of someone with the power to hold him accountable. Lisa took a deep breath, feeling a sense of justice settling over her. She had waited for this moment, had prepared for it. And now she was delivering the truth in a way that no one could ignore. She knew that this was not just about her, not just about this one officer. This was about setting an example, about showing people that respect, integrity, and justice were the foundations of true authority. She looked at Officer Johnson one last time, her expression calm but resolute. "I'll be filing a full report on this incident," she said, her voice steady. "And believe me, there will be consequences." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, surrounded by the silent crowd. Each step she took felt lighter, more powerful. She knew she had done what was right, had stood up for herself and for the values she believed in. And she knew that, in doing so, she had reminded everyone watching that respect and dignity were things no one could take away, no matter how they tried. The crowd slowly began to disperse, murmuring among themselves about what they had just witnessed. Some looked at Officer Johnson with a mixture of disappointment and disgust, while others watched Lisa walk away with admiration, inspired by her strength, her composure, her quiet power. She had revealed her true self not through anger or confrontation, but through patience, dignity, and authority. As she continued on her path, Lisa felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had faced prejudice, endured disrespect, and in the end had shown the world who she truly was. She knew there would be more challenges, more moments where she would have to stand her ground, but she was ready. She was prepared to face whatever came her way with the same strength, the same patience, and the same unwavering commitment to justice. This was not just a victory for herself. It was a reminder to everyone that appearances could be deceiving, that true strength often lay beneath the surface, hidden until the right moment. And as she disappeared into the crowd, her badge tucked away once more, she carried with her the quiet knowledge that she had made a difference, that she had shown the world the power of resilience, of integrity, and of unwavering courage. The scene in the street was still vivid in everyone's minds. Officer Johnson's arrogance, his smug expressions, and his dismissive tone had all melted away the moment Lisa had revealed her badge and her authority. Lisa Thompson, quiet and composed, had stood there like a beacon of strength, a force of justice that no one had expected. She hadn't needed to raise her voice or make any threats. Her calm words, her unshakable presence, and her badge, all had spoken louder than anything else. Not long after that tense exchange, the consequences of Officer Johnson's actions began to unfold. Word of the incident spread quickly through the police department and beyond. Officers talked in hushed tones about what had happened, whispering about how one of their own had crossed a line he should have never dared to approach. It didn't take long for the news to reach the higher-ups, and soon the department had to act. Officer Johnson was called in for questioning. For the first time in his career, he found himself on the other side of the interrogation table. He was no longer the one asking the questions. He was the one giving answers, the one defending his actions. He could feel the weight of each question thrown his way, each inquiry about his conduct, his treatment of Lisa, his choice to abuse the authority he had once taken for granted. The tables had turned, and there was no escaping it. The room was quiet as Officer Johnson tried to explain his side, tried to justify his actions. But the evidence was stacked against him. Witnesses had come forward, ordinary citizens who had seen the entire interaction unfold, who had seen how he had treated Lisa, the disrespect, the hostility. Their statements painted a picture that left little room for doubt. As Officer Johnson sat there, facing a panel of his superiors, he realized that his confidence, his arrogance, had vanished. He was no longer the powerful figure he had once believed himself to be. The reality of his actions, the consequences of his choices, were now staring him in the face, and there was no escaping them. The people who once respected him, who once saw him as a fellow officer, were now questioning everything they knew about him. His conduct had shattered that respect, had turned the admiration of his colleagues into disappointment. After hours of questioning, it became clear that Officer Johnson would not be walking away from this unscathed. The department had a duty to uphold its reputation, to ensure that justice was served even within its own ranks. A decision was made to suspend him from duty, pending further investigation. This wasn't just a temporary consequence. It was a signal that his actions had crossed a line that could not be ignored. As he left the interrogation room, his head hanging low, Officer Johnson felt the weight of his actions pressing down on him. His badge, once a symbol of pride and authority, now felt heavy, a reminder of the power he had abused. He realized that he had brought this on himself, that his choices had led him to this point. He had believed himself untouchable, but now he was facing the reality of his own actions. Meanwhile, Lisa returned to her duties, her position in internal affairs unchanged but strengthened in the eyes of her colleagues. The story of her encounter with Officer Johnson had spread, and people now looked at her with a newfound respect. She hadn't just stood up for herself. She had stood up for what was right. She had shown everyone what it meant to be a true leader, to uphold justice not just with words but with actions. Lisa's quiet strength, her calm authority, had left a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed or heard about that day. The people in her department began to see her in a new light. Those who had once dismissed her or underestimated her because of her reserved nature now recognized the depth of her character, the power in her silence. They saw her as someone who didn't need to demand respect, but simply commanded it through her actions, through her unwavering commitment to justice. A few weeks after the incident, the department held a small ceremony to honor her dedication, her courage, and her integrity. Lisa stood before her colleagues, her superiors, and even some members of the community who had heard about her story. She stood tall, her expression calm but filled with pride. She had earned this moment, had earned the respect and admiration of everyone in that room. Her captain spoke about her commitment to justice, about how her actions had reminded everyone of the true purpose of their work. He praised her for standing up against injustice, for showing strength in the face of disrespect, and for handling the situation with grace and dignity. As he spoke, Lisa felt a sense of fulfillment, a sense of peace. She had not sought recognition, but she knew that this acknowledgement was more than just for her. It was a message to everyone, a reminder that respect, fairness, and justice were the cornerstones of their duty. As she looked around the room, she saw familiar faces, some of whom she had known for years, others who had only recently joined the department. She saw the pride in their eyes, the admiration, and she knew that her actions had made a difference. She had not only reclaimed her own respect, but had set an example for others to follow. She had shown them that true strength was not loud or aggressive. It was quiet, resilient, and unwavering. After the ceremony, many of her colleagues came up to her, expressing their gratitude, their respect. Some admitted that they had not fully understood her before, that they had misjudged her silence, her calm nature. But now, they saw her for who she truly was, a leader, a protector of justice, a person who believed in doing what was right, even when it was difficult. Lisa accepted their words with humility, grateful for their support, but never letting it cloud her purpose. She knew that respect was something earned, not given, And she had always believed in earning it through her actions, through her commitment to her values. This moment, this recognition, was a testament to her journey, to the challenges she had faced and overcome. As for Officer Johnson, his suspension eventually turned into a permanent dismissal. The department could not afford to overlook his actions, to allow someone who had abused their power to remain in their ranks. He left quietly, his career in ruins, his reputation tarnished. He had once believed that his badge gave him authority over others, but he now understood that true authority came from integrity, from respect, from treating others with dignity. He had learned this lesson too late, and the consequences were his to bear. In the end, justice was served, not just through punishment, but through the example Lisa had set. She had shown everyone that true power came from within, from staying true to one's values, from standing up for what was right, even in the face of adversity. Her actions had restored faith in the department, had reminded everyone of their duty to serve with honor and respect. As Lisa continued her work in internal affairs, she carried this experience with her, a reminder of her own strength, of the impact one person could have when they chose to act with integrity. She knew there would be other challenges, other moments when she would need to stand her ground, to hold others accountable. But she was ready. She had proven to herself and to everyone around her that she was capable, that she was strong, that she was a force for justice. And so, Lisa Thompson continued her journey, her heart filled with the quiet confidence that had carried her through so much. She knew that her actions had left a mark, not just on Officer Johnson, but on everyone who had witnessed or heard of her story. She had shown them the power of resilience, of patience, of dignity. She had shown them what true strength looked like. In the end, Lisa's story was not just one of personal victory, but a story of justice, of respect reclaimed, of power that could not be taken away by anyone. She had taught a lesson that would not be forgotten, a lesson about the true meaning of authority, of responsibility, of honor. And as she walked through the halls of her department, as she met the eyes of her colleagues with quiet pride, she knew that she had done more than just reclaim her own respect. She had set a standard, had become a symbol of what it meant to serve with integrity. Lisa had proven, once and for all, that respect was not something demanded but something earned, that true authority came from one's character, one's actions, one's commitment to justice. And as she continued her work, she carried this knowledge with her, a quiet, powerful reminder of who she was and what she stood for. She was Captain Lisa Thompson, a woman of strength, of integrity, of justice, and no one could ever take that away from her. As Lisa walked away from the ceremony, surrounded by her colleagues and the supportive community that had gathered, she felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. Her journey had been long and filled with moments that tested her spirit, but each trial had only made her stronger. This day, this moment of acknowledgement, was the result of years of patience, resilience, and an unbreakable commitment to what she believed in. She reflected on how the simplest acts, standing her ground, remaining calm in the face of disrespect, letting her actions speak louder than her words, had brought her to this point. Lisa had never been someone who sought attention, who needed praise or recognition to feel valued. She had always known her worth, had always believed that real respect was something that couldn't be taken by anyone else. Her story was proof of that. As she looked around, she saw the respect in the eyes of her colleagues, the gratitude in the faces of those she had inspired. These were people who had once seen her as quiet, reserved, maybe even distant, but now they saw her as something much more, a person who led by example, a person who understood the true meaning of strength and justice. She had reminded them all that power didn't come from a title or a badge. It came from within, from one's character, one's actions, one's willingness to stand up for what was right. In the days that followed, Lisa continued her work with the same dedication and humility that had defined her career. She knew that there would always be challenges, always be people like Officer Johnson who would test her patience and her resolve. But she was ready for them. She understood that her journey was not over, that each day was a new opportunity to uphold the values she held so dearly. Her experience with Officer Johnson had left a lasting impact, not just on him, but on everyone who had witnessed or heard about it. People now looked at her as a reminder that respect, honor, and justice were not just words. They were principles to live by. She had shown them that true strength wasn't loud or aggressive. It was quiet, resilient, and unwavering. And in doing so, she had become a symbol of justice, a beacon of hope for those who faced similar challenges. Lisa knew that her story would be shared, that others would look to her as an example of what it meant to hold one's head high, to face adversity with grace, to let one's actions speak for themselves. She hoped that her journey would inspire others, that it would remind them that even in the face of prejudice and disrespect, there was power in remaining true to oneself. She wanted people to understand that justice wasn't just about punishment or retribution. It was about fairness, dignity, and the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. Reflecting on her own experiences, Lisa understood that the challenges she had faced had shaped her, had made her the person she was today. She had learned that every moment of doubt, every encounter with prejudice, had only strengthened her resolve, had only deepened her understanding of the world and her place in it. She knew that her strength came not from her badge or her title, but from the choices she made each day, the decision to lead with integrity, to treat others with respect, to remain calm in the face of adversity. Her story was a testament to the power of resilience, to the idea that true strength came from within. It was a reminder that those who faced the harshest judgments often had the greatest power, a power that couldn't be taken away by anyone else. She knew that people would judge, would make assumptions, would try to put her in a box. But she also knew that their opinions did not define her. She was defined by her actions, by her values, by her unwavering commitment to justice. And so, as she continued her journey, Lisa carried with her a quiet confidence, a deep sense of purpose. She knew that there would always be those who doubted her, who underestimated her, who judged her based on appearances. But she also knew that her strength was something they could never touch, something that would continue to guide her, to inspire her, to empower her. In the end, Lisa's story was a simple but powerful reminder that respect was not something demanded but something earned. It was a reminder that justice was not about revenge or anger, but about fairness, integrity, and honor. She had proven that true power lay not in the ability to control others, but in the ability to control oneself, to remain calm and grounded, to face adversity with courage and grace. And as she walked away, head held high, she left behind a legacy that would not be forgotten. She had shown everyone what it meant to be strong, to be just, to be true to oneself. Her journey was far from over, but she knew that she was ready for whatever came next. She was Lisa Thompson, a woman of strength, a protector of justice, a symbol of resilience. And she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same quiet power that had carried her through so much. Sometimes, Lisa thought to herself, those who judge the quickest are the ones who see the least. They look at the surface, they make their assumptions, but they never see the true depth of a person. And those who face the harshest judgment, they're often the ones with the most power, the most strength. Lisa knew that her journey would continue, that there would be other battles, other moments when she would have to stand up for herself and for what she believed in. But she was ready. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was not just a quiet woman, not just another face in the crowd. She was a force of justice, a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience. In her heart, she knew that her story would inspire others, that it would serve as a reminder of the power that lay within each person, the strength that came from staying true to one's values, to one's principles. She hoped that her journey would encourage others to stand tall, to face adversity with courage, to let their actions speak louder than words.